The movie begins by introducing a man named Ihsan, who works in a hospital. He has no family or friends, and despite his good behavior, even the hospital staff doesn't treat him well. As Ihsan was helping patients, he was sent by the doctor to get X-ray results. He went downstairs and retrieved the results for the doctor. Meanwhile, two nurses in the locker room were gossiping about a doctor who is having an affair with another woman. Ihsan, who was hiding in the locker, got out. Later, in the cafeteria, Ihsan sat alone while eating. After his shift ended, he went back to his house. He stopped at a shop to pick up fruits and headed to his house. When he reached his apartment, his landlady told him the rent was overdue. She also told him to get the ceiling checked because it was leaking. He went inside and came back out to ask if she could take the iron bars off because he trips on them every time he goes in, but she told him to move carefully instead. The next day, Ihsan went back to work. The nurse there scolded him, telling him he needed to get serum. Ihsan, who was in love with her, didn't mind her scolding. He then went to the morgue and got inside after making sure no one was looking. He took out a female body and removed the cover from her. After taking the cover off, he began touching the body all over and started talking to her. She was a woman who couldn't survive a heart surgery, and he asked if she had a family or kids. He cried while talking to the body and kept reassuring her not to be angry. He then started becoming intimate with the body. He went back to his apartment, where his landlady was waiting for him again. She asked if he was overworking since he was later than usual today, and then told him he hadn't picked up the bills from the post box. He told her he would take them out and went to his house. He then took out a box and placed a hair in a plastic bag from his pocket, adding it to the other similar plastic bags inside. In a nightclub, a young girl was drinking and taking drugs. Back at Ihsan's, he woke up to a phone call, but he told the caller it was the wrong number before hanging up. The next day, an injured patient came into the hospital. The nurse Ihsan was obsessed with was getting ready in the locker room, and Ihsan was stalking her from the locker once again. After she left, he got out, picked up her lipstick, and took it. After work, Ihsan went back to his house and watched TV while eating. In the nightclub, the same girl was once again dancing and drinking. Clearly drunk, she went outside, walking unsteadily as she tried to keep her balance. She saw some street art and stopped to appreciate it, leaning against it. However, her head started spinning and she collapsed to the ground. While on the ground, she shook slightly before dying, revealing that she had overdosed on something. At the hospital, Ihsan entered the doctor's office. He took out a stethoscope and started listening to his own heartbeat. He then walked around the room, touching and examining the things there. Later that night, Ihsan took a snack and sat by the dock, watching fireworks. He then went back to the hospital and started having a meal in the cafeteria. In front of him, a nurse was sitting, and he stared at her constantly, which creeped her out. Later, as he was cleaning a surgery room, he saw his reflection on the back of a metal plate. He noticed the congenital dark spot in his left eye and then dipped his fingers in blood, applying it to his right eye. He picked up a scissor as if to cut out the dark spot, but stopped himself from doing so. As he went out, he saw another patient dying. He went to work in the file cabinet, but he got frustrated and threw it away. He then went to the morgue and took out another body. It was the body of the girl who had died of an overdose. He started talking to her like he had with the others. He complimented how beautiful she was, comparing her with other women. He analyzed every part of her body, saying she was well-groomed. He asked about her husband and cried, saying all the information about her was hidden inside, but he couldn't learn any of it. He proceeded to tell her about previous women who had died after being brought to the hospital for treatment. He then told her about a girl from when he was in an orphanage. She was as beautiful as she was, and she used to cut herself. One day, he found her dead in the backyard. Ihsan couldn't leave her. Even though she had died, she began to rot, but he still didn't leave. He cried as he remembered this. The next day, Ihsan saw the girl's body being taken for burial. He then went to a graveyard to find her. He spotted her grave and lay on top of it on the ground for a long time. Later, he went back to his house, ate his food while watching TV, but this time he was talking to someone. It was the girl from the morgue. He had dug up her grave to take her out and had brought her home with him. He then went out and bought her clothes. He dressed her up and placed her on his bed. While lying on the bed with the body, he began touching and kissing it. He then unzipped the dress and became intimate with the body. The next day at work, Ihsan was sitting on a swing, completely lost in his thoughts. a nurse came calling for him, snapping him out of his thoughts, and told him a male patient needed a catheter. He went upstairs to get the catheter for him. He then went to the bus station to wait for the bus to go home. Once home, he began preparing the girl. He applied salt to her body, put on mascara, lipstick, shoes, and a necklace, then sat her on the couch next to him. As he was eating, he kept talking to her, telling her that she looked beautiful that day. At that moment, someone knocked on the door, and he went to answer. It was his landlady. She asked if he had guests because she heard noises coming from his room, but he said it was just the TV. She then asked if he had a corkscrew, and he was about to close the door to get her one, but she insisted on coming inside to check the ceiling. He refused to let her in and said there was no need since it was no longer leaking. The next morning, he went back to the hospital and took foundation from the nurse's bag. He took it home and applied it to the corpse in his house to cover the dark, rotting spots. Later that night, Ihsan took the body out and went on a boat. The next morning at work, a nurse called him and told him to check the results of some hormone tests. He told her to do it herself. She reminded him that it was his job, but he hinted at her affair with the doctor by saying she had free time since the doctor was off. He then took the cigarette she was smoking, leaving her stunned. Later, he was called by a doctor who told him the files in the closet needed to be carried to the warehouse, but Ihsan told him he was busy and went to sleep in the file room. As he was going home later, the same guys who always invited him to sit with them teased him again that day. He stopped to say hello this time. At home, he took out everything he bought and dressed the body. He then took the body out and put it on a swing to play. Afterward, he carried the body back home. As he was going up the stairs, his landlady came out of her house and asked why he was out in the middle of the night, standing by her door. He told her he went out to pick up some things sent from his hometown. She went back to her house, not noticing that he was carrying a body. Back at home, Ihsan noticed the body was rotting, but he had no intention of burying it and kept washing it with salt. In the bathroom, he stared at his own reflection for a long time and combed his hair backward. He then changed clothes and looked at his reflection, smiling. The next day, he went to work and was unusually friendly with the staff. He took lab results to the doctor, who complimented his hairstyle. The doctor then asked him to sit and offered him candy. He asked where Ihsan was from. Ihsan told him he didn't know, and when the doctor asked if he had ever asked his parents, Ihsan fell silent. The doctor realized he didn't have a family and asked him about it. Instead, Ihsan replied that he had a girlfriend. Ihsan then went to get X-ray results, and as he was doing so, later, as he was sitting in a cafe next to doctors and nurses, he suddenly started laughing frantically and screaming. As he went back home, he sat with the guys from the cafe and played games with them. When he went to his apartment, his landlady was waiting for him. She asked about the changes in him, like his hair, clothes, and having guests. She then mentioned that the apartment smelled bad and there were bugs all over. She warned him not to get them in trouble, and he went inside. Inside his house, even he couldn't bear the smell, but he kept the body there. Later, after Ihsan left, his landlady came by, but she got a call and went outside before seeing the body. Ihsan returned with chemicals he had bought from a store and filled the tub. He then put the body inside the filled tub. After he left the body there, the woman rose from the tub, coming back to life. The next morning, Ihsan woke up to his alarm, realizing it was just a nightmare, and went to check the body, which was still there. He saw that the body was still rotting and hadn't progressed. At that moment, his landlady came and told him the place smelled like alcohol all over and asked if he had started drinking. He told her it was alcohol from the hospital and slammed the door. Ihsan then went to buy a fridge. He tested if he could fit inside and climbed in. Despite the seller's suggestion that there were more affordable options, he decided to buy it. The landlady came by again and asked why he bought such a big fridge, but he brushed her off and closed the door on her. He then put the body inside the fridge. The next day, he brought coffee to a group of doctors and nurses and offered them tea, saying it was from him. Instead of thanking him, they joked that even if something was wrong with the tea, they were safe in the hospital. Later, Ihsan sat with the doctor, drinking tea. The doctor asked how his girlfriend was, and Ihsan told him he had bought her flowers yesterday. The doctor then suggested that he buy her white daisies. Later that night, Ihsan brought flowers to his house, and his landlady was waiting for him by the door door. She asked why he had changed the locks and told him that if he didn't give her a key the next day, she would report him to the police for adultery. He told her he would give it to her tomorrow, then went inside and put the flowers on the body. He started acting crazily, telling the body that they would run away together and that he loved her. After his frantic talk, he tried to go downstairs, but he saw that the iron bar was locked by the landlady and realized he was stuck inside. He then went inside and decided to go through the roof, attempting to break it. The next day, he didn't show up for work. The movie concludes with Ihsan's body seen in the freezer alongside the corpse.